Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session. We're waiting just for a few more people to arrive, and then we shall kick off with this afternoon's session. So, be with you shortly.
Oh, it's installed inside. Oh, check.
Yeah, it's not the external model.
Cool.
It's fun.
Oh, where
Yeah, it's still active as electronics. Yes.
Oh, you didn't went over it.
Yes.
I think I did go over this. I mean, that market and I saw the video.
I don't think anybody else around for that, so I can kick it off. And then they can just catch up when they're here. They can always go back and watch videos. Okay, so we're going to kick things off now. I think let's start with an introduction. I'm Justin Williams, and I shall rotate the camera so everybody else can say hi. There you go. You guys want to just introduce yourselves for the two people that we have online? Go for it.
I'm Naldeep Khalidin, and the exam that I write is in September.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and my exam is next week, Saturday, so we need to push.
Hello, Alexia. Also writing on the 13th. Yeah, ish. Hi, Mazvi here. Also writing next week. Like Melissa said, push. Study of the day.
I think everybody's getting quite nervous now after 3 months of hard work. It's all very close and happening pretty soon. Okay, if we have a look at our schedule that we've been popping up week after week, we can see where we started back in March and where we've got to now, just a week and a half away from the exam. We've reorganized slightly so that this week we're going to be covering exam day tips and techniques, and then we can have a look at some questions and issues that you might be struggling with at the moment. And then we can talk about Saturday and the sample exam and how we're going to handle that. And then next week, I've kind of just put it down as being final polishing. The date for next week may need to move it to Wednesday instead of Tuesday, but let's talk about it later. I've just got something that I might need to attend on that day, so rather than move it at very short notice, if we can move it now to next week Wednesday, then it's firm. Otherwise, it's 90% chance I can make it on Tuesday, but I don't want to mess you guys around so close to the exam date. You've got enough to worry about without stressing about anything unnecessary. Okay. So on Saturday then for the sample exam, the real exam when you get there is going to have 200 questions in it, and you're going to have 4 hours to do it. Okay. So the recommendation always is that before you go and do the real exam, you should at least do one sample exam, mock exam of 4 hours, so that you're used to sitting down for that length of time, and you've got a feel for what it's all about, the concentration levels you need, and how that's all going to work. Okay. So if we're going to do the 4-hour exam on Saturday, that means we've got to find a chunk of the day to do it. So we could either do it as 100 questions starting at 9, finishing at 11, or we could do 200 questions starting at like 7 and finishing at 11. Because I'm still trying to find a way that we've got perhaps an hour after you've finished just to talk about the experience and how you feel and how it went, without using up the entire day, so you've still got time to go and carry on studying or deal with your family commitments, whatever else you need. So 7 o'clock is a bit of an early start, but it's a way of at least fitting in what we need for the day. The other option is to kind of almost have 2 starting times. So you can pick whether you want to do 100 questions or 200 questions, and if it's 100 questions, start at 9 and still finish at 11. If it's 200 questions, then you can start at 7. So I'm not sure what your thinking is around that and what's going to work best for each of you in that respect. I mean, is 7 o'clock a doable start time, or is it just not really feasible? Okay. Okay, cool. So then, and you're happy to do 200 questions, because that's what it's going to be like on the real exam day. Okay. Okay, cool. So then that's what we'll aim to do. We'll aim to do 200 questions on Saturday. And then what we'll do is we'll, as I said, we'll try and get that study book and get a mock exam of 200 questions. If that doesn't work out, we'll find another way of getting 200 questions together. And then we'll try and get sample kind of answer sheets that you can then fill in, so you're kind of getting into the groove of what it's like. I'm pretty sure that there's a sample answer sheet in the physical book that we can then use that. Okay. Yeah. Sorry?
Anything we need to put in?
Yeah, I think treat it as a mock exam. So bring your ID, print out your exam ticket and bring it, just so that you're in the habit of doing that. So print a second copy so that your primary one stays in the safe or somewhere. Yeah, so then bring along a couple of pencils, bring along a couple of erasers, and yeah, that's pretty much it then. And just now we'll talk through like the real exam day and what you can and can't do on there. So we can kind of treat it like that as far as possible. Okay.
Without exams, if you want to be sure.
Yeah, if you don't have everything you need, don't bother coming to the exam. Okay? And make sure that you're there on time. Okay, so a couple of people had asked for kind of tips for the exam and things that they can do and look out for. So what I did is I went and Googled around to try and find different sources of material. So a couple of people interested in my own personal experience, so I've included my own ideas and things mixed in amongst this. And then found various references online, which some of them are worth looking at, others have just got a few items in it. So the first one I've listed there is Suresh Deshpande and Rafiq, their kind of tips for CISA exam. That's quite a lengthy PDF document that they put a lot of time and effort into. Definitely worth getting hold of that and reading through it. And they've kind of got tips and techniques and ideas for each phase of the whole process, right? From when you decide to register for the exam. So it's a bit late to be looking at some of those because you've registered, you're done with that, and you're kind of towards the end of the study period. But nonetheless, it's worth reading through that document. If you can just Google it, you find it quite quickly. Or maybe when I put the slides up, I can put up some links to that as well. So I'll try and add that up over the next day or so. But if you Google it, you'll find it quite quickly. I've actually used that as the basis for a lot of what I've put in the next few slides. Then there were a couple of other kind of websites that gave you a couple of hints and tips and things. Some of them useful, a lot of repeat items, but nonetheless, one can read through those things to get an idea. And then, if you remember back to the very first session we had, for those of you who were here, we kind of went through a top 10 steps to acing the exam, which I've included those slides again, so we can just quickly look through those. Okay, so if we start now before the exam, the very first thing is that ISACA put out an exam candidate information guide. Okay? And that's freely downloadable off the ISACA website. In the past, they used to have two separate guides, and like a candidate guide and some other guide. They've combined all that into one. So it's just one document you need to go and download. Certainly worth downloading that, reading it. They've also tell you what you need on the day and kind of the rules for writing the exam. So go and get that and read through that. Okay. Then a couple of other useful ideas. So the first thing is that this is not an easy exam and it's not a small undertaking. So to do this thing, it's kind of like they call the MBA the divorce course. This is not quite as bad as that, but you don't have much time left. So just make sure that your family and friends understand what's required of you over these next 8 to 10 days, so that you can actually put in whatever last effort is required to maximize your chances of getting through the exam. It's something often we don't think about, and then people end up bugging us and distracting us and asking us to do this and that. By actively and proactively going and speaking to those work colleagues, friends, family, and saying to them, hey, you know what, for the next 10 days, don't invite me to anything. Don't try and convince me to go out. Either convince me to stay home and study and give me all the support I need. Because that, again, it might just be the extra half hour that makes the difference between getting through or not getting through. So take that step and do that. The second thing is just around motivation. Motivation is exceptionally important for all of this. Positive mindset, keeping positive, staying positive, and finding a way that whenever you've got a gap, whenever you've got a free few minutes, use that to go through the review manual or to do some of the online questions and keep pushing through that. So keep yourself motivated, use whatever techniques you can. And these guys talk about some kind of visualization and positive thinking. So visualize yourself receiving the ISACA exam results saying, congratulations, you have passed your exam. Okay. Visualize yourself getting congratulated by colleagues and friends and family. Okay. And use that to try and help you stay motivated. And then add to that any other motivation techniques that work for yourself. If that means you have to go and buy a big stack of chocolate bars and for every 100 questions you answer, you get a nice slab of chocolate, well then do that too. Okay, whatever it takes at this stage. Okay. Then when you're going through all of this, remember that the exam, it's not technology specific. Okay, they pretty much try and stick to principles. So they're not going to test you about a Cisco firewall or a Palo Alto firewall and ask you what the differences are or anything like that. They'll never do that. It'll be around types of technology or classes of technology and principles around those things. So if you start finding yourself doing external readings and getting too involved and stuck in specific types of technology and brands of technology, then realize that you're getting too deep into that and you're never going to get asked on those things, and come back to the basic principles and fundamentals. Okay. Then also, the intention of the exam is to understand, or is to test your understanding of principles, not your memory. So it's not a learn these things off by heart kind of thing. And you're never going to get those kinds of questions. So don't try and cram those things. Rather focus on making sure you understand the principles and the underlying technologies. We've had some of those things come up in the past around some of the segregation of duty items and some of the OSI network level and different layers. Nobody's going to ask you what's layer 3, what's layer 4. They're going to build on that understanding to ask you another question. So just see where you're focusing your effort. Learn those basic principles, but don't try and parrot fashion learn vast chunks of the review guide. It's really not going to help you. Okay. Then try not to stay up late before the exam. So try and plan to have all your studies finished maybe a day or so before. If the night before you just want to go through a few things to calm the nerves and just make sure you're comfortable, that's fine, do that. But don't plan to buy a case of Red Bull and stay up to 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning and then go straight through, have a shower and go to the exam. That's honestly not going to help you at all. If you learn 5 extra items during that whole period, you're probably going to get 10 or 20 items from during the exam because you're too tired to read the question properly and focus properly. Your greatest asset is having a sharp mind. So make sure that you're in the right frame of mind, you're in the right space when you get to the exam. Okay, then prepare yourself emotionally and physically for the exam. So try and avoid all distractions, try and keep all negativity, family issues, whatever it is, try and put those one side. So when you get to the exam, you can focus completely on the matter at hand. You're not worried about that. Also try and avoid doing anything extraordinary that you don't normally do. So, the day before is not the time to start taking up action cricket or action soccer and getting yourself a broken leg or anything like that. Just try and keep chilled. If you normally go to gym, keep going to gym. So don't change too much in your routine either. And just make sure that physically and mentally you're prepared for that exam. Okay. Then also try not to stress yourself physically before or during the exam. Just keep calm, stay chilled, stay focused. Then the other suggestion is try doing a mock exam of 4 hours so it isn't in your experience. If you only ever do 10 or 20 questions at a time over a 15-minute period, you're coaching yourself and training yourself to be able to concentrate for 15 minutes at a time. When you get to a 4-hour exam, after 15 minutes, you're kind of now wanting to go and have that piece of chocolate, have that break. And after an hour, you're just nowhere. That's not going to work. Okay? You really need to be in a space where you can do those longer periods. So even when you're studying now, if you've got large chunks of time to study, use those large chunks to go through and practice your concentration. If you're studying between client visits or something, you've only got 15 minutes at a time, fine, use those. But where you can, move towards longer periods. So instead of doing 20 questions at a time, move to doing 50 or 100 at a time. Okay. Then just about the exam. Some of it's obvious, but we must just keep reminding ourselves, okay? So the exam is a multiple choice exam. So that's an objective thing. It's not a subjective thing where you have to actually write lengthy paragraphs or essays about your opinion on certain things. Okay. Then the exam questions are generally either fact-based, so it's about a technology or it's about a standard or a technique, or it's analysis-based, where they give you some information and some content, and then you have to make a decision. And based on the decision, you have to rank something or choose the cheapest or the best or the most likely outcomes. Okay. And that's really the only way things can go. It's one of those 2 items. Okay. Then read questions carefully. We've spoken about exam technique over the weeks. We've practiced this, but keep doing this and don't forget that. Read the questions carefully, read all of the answers, eliminate the answers that you know to be wrong, have a look at what's left, and then make your best choice. Okay? You're cutting down the odds of getting things wrong, and you're helping yourself. Even if you're not 100% sure of the answer, a 50-50 guess is better than a 1 in 4 guess. Okay? We've also spoken over the time about a glossary of terms, and we've said, when you come across terms that you're not really sure about, then write them down, investigate them, and make sure you have that at hand. What I discovered recently, like today, is that ISACA have actually done this for you. There is actually a glossary of terms on the website. So you can go on there, and go to isaka.org/pages/glossary, and there's an interactive glossary there that you can click on and get the definitions of that. And then there's also a CISA specific PDF that you can download. So it's worth having a look at that and just perhaps reading through it so you get an understanding of what kind of terms they are. Most of the terms that they use within the exam should be within that glossary. So if you have a fair understanding of what's in there, then it's great. If you read through that and there's a whole lot of things that you don't really understand, or perhaps highlight those, bring them to the next session, and we can then talk through some of those and clear up some of those. But that'll help you then go into the exam with a reasonable level of comfort, knowing that when you come across these terms, you're not going to kind of get sidewinded there looking and saying, what the heck is this or what the heck is that? You'll have that common understanding. Then the exam intends to test understanding of concepts and practices, not the English language. So it's not an English test. Okay? So the kind of thing they're saying is try not to over-analyze the situation. There's a lot of people who English is not their first language, all across the world, writing this exam. Okay? Just now there's a point which is kind of contradictory to that, but not quite. Okay? But, so, yeah. Then the exam has 200 questions. We've mentioned that a number of times. So it's a fairly lengthy exam. So you kind of need to get almost into the zone, into a stride of getting through those questions. And that'll help you get through it within the time limits. As soon as you can get into that stride of getting through the questions, it becomes much easier. And practice is what's going to help you do that. Then those questions are not in any particular order. You're not going to get chapter 1 questions first, then chapter 2, then chapter 3. So you really shouldn't be trying to figure out which domain does this question come from. It really doesn't matter. You might need to use knowledge from a whole lot of different domains in order to answer the question. The question itself may come from one domain, but the answers they give you could be spread across 2 or 3 different domains. And if you're answering it only within the context of a particular domain, you might not get the right answer, might not get to the answer so easily. So don't try and box things in, just try and keep an open mind and use the knowledge that you've acquired over the period to actually just answer those questions. Then exam scores, we were talking about exam scores just before we went on the air here. The exam scores, it's not a percentage, it's not an arithmetic kind of score that you can actually work things out. They're scaled scores. Okay? So your scores range from 200 to 800, and you need to get 450 as the minimum being required to pass. And 450 is kind of based on that particular exam and what answers are required to show that you actually understand and appreciate the knowledge and the questions that have been put forward. So nobody can say, well, out of 200 questions, you need to get 120 right to get that 450. It's not like that. Some questions get eliminated from the exam. After the exam, they go and analyze all the results, and they look at some questions and say, well, maybe this question over here, not enough people got it right, or too many people answered that answer over there, and therefore perhaps the question is not correct, or we need to reassess it, so they can eliminate certain questions. So even though there are 200 questions in the exam, maybe only 195 of them count towards your final score. You won't ever know how many do count, and you won't ever know which ones do count. So try not to get yourself in a fuss over a question. You look at a question and you go, no, this question's wrong, and you get yourself all worked up because the question's wrong, and then they just exclude it, and then what? You've now messed your whole exam up because of one bad question, which doesn't even count in the end. So in that way, trust the process and let it just happen. As I said earlier as well, I've actually, on my website, I've put up my results that I received back from ISACA for the last 3 exams I did. So that's one for CRISC, one for CGEIT, and then the last CISA one. And you can just see what to expect when you get your exam results. They tell you what your overall scaled score is. They tell you per domain what your scaled score is, so you can see how you did in each one of those. And then you can try and do some calculations to say, well, can I take this one and multiply by this percentage and work out an overall one? Not really much point in that. They've kind of given you all the answers and all the information you're going to get. One of the guys asked earlier as well, will you ever get like a model answer to the exam to see which questions you answered and what you gave and which ones you got right and wrong? You're never going to get that. The closest you're ever going to get is that sheet back from ISACA, which tells you what score you got for each of those domains. And you need to aim to be passing at this time so that you have no need to really go back and do anything beyond that. It's more just for interest's sake, so so that you can see, did you do well in the sections that you thought you did well in, and did you do badly in the others? But that's about it. There's nothing more to it than that. Okay, so in terms of an overall approach to the exam then, the first thing is to try and keep an open mind. Okay, this is an IT auditing exam, so try and answer from the perspective of the IT auditor. You know, a lot of questions could be scenario-based, they could be talking about change control or access or security. You're not answering from the perspective of the IT manager or the security officer, you're answering from the perspective of the auditor. So to bear that in mind. You know, a lot of people may not be an IT auditor in their day job, they're doing something else. So try and place yourself in the shoes of the IT auditor when you're answering these things and look at it from that perspective. Okay. The test is 4 hours long, 200 questions. So try and keep to those 50 questions per hour. It's a nice chunk that you can manage that, you can track that very easily. So try and do that. Okay. Generally what happens in the exam on the day is that at the front of the exam venue on the board, there's normally a clock, which is the official timekeeping. So that's the time that counts. And then they normally write up different marks to say, you know, the first half hour, then each half hour they write there. And as you pass through those marks, they cross those off for you. So you can use those to keep track of time, or you can use your own watch. That's up to you. But remember, they're going to be working according to the official time. Okay. And then just related to that official time, although you've got a start time printed on your exam ticket, and you need to be there before that start time, they won't necessarily start exactly on that time. There could be something that ends up delaying things by 5 or 10 minutes. It might take slightly longer to get through the exam instructions. Don't worry yourself about that. They're not going to cheat you out of time. They're not going to say, well, we should have started at 9 o'clock and we started at 10 past 9, and therefore, you know, we still got to finish at 1 o'clock. No, they'll let you finish at 10 past 1. So they'll have all that written up on the board, and don't worry too much about that. Okay. Then, if you do the math strictly, you'll see you've got about 70 odd seconds per question to actually come up with your answer. I say don't worry about that. Work on just 1 minute per question. Okay? It's easier to deal with it like that. And you know, it lets you just focus on saying 50 questions, 50 minutes. You've got an hour to get through. So if you go over on 1 or 2 questions, as long as you're within your hour, you're okay. And if you feel you need to go to the bathroom, you need a break, do that. Okay. As much as everybody looks at me and says, hey, you finished your exam so quickly, I did finish my exam quickly. I finished it in about 2 hours and 15 minutes. But that didn't stop me getting up and going to the bathroom at least once during the period. Okay. I'm ADD, so I find concentrating very, very difficult. So that means after an hour, even though I was kind of getting into a nice rhythm, I was wherever in my exam paper, it didn't matter, put my pencil down, called over to the chief examiner and said, I need to go to the bathroom, got up, walked out, went to the bathroom, had a drink of water, came back in, sat down, and then carried on. And I needed that break just to get my concentration levels back up to where they should be. Okay? So I would suggest doing something like that. Even if you're thinking, well, you know, I don't really need to go to the bathroom. It's almost less about going to the bathroom as it is about getting up, getting the blood flowing, just clearing the mind slightly, and then being able to come back and carry on doing it. So certainly look at that. Okay, then people always ask, well, the questions that we get in the exam, should we expect to see the same questions that we've seen, you know, week in, week out when we're doing these sample questions, the questions that come out of the CRM, the question answer database online? Don't expect to see the same questions. Okay? If you don't expect to see the same questions and you think you're going to get completely new and unique questions for everything, then you can't be negatively surprised. You know, you're not going to be sitting there thinking, hey, I've just done 20 questions and I haven't seen one of these before. This is just not on. You know, it's not like that. And then as we discussed earlier, even if you do see a question that you think, hey, this is the same question, I've seen this question, I know the answer, be very, very careful, you know, because you might look and you're going down, you go A, B, and you go, oh, there's the answer C over there. But hey, you know what, they've introduced a new answer D, and they're saying, what's the best, or what's the most, or what's the cheapest? You know, and they've come up with a new way that's even cheaper than the ways that were known previously, and you picked the one that was previously the cheapest, now it's only the second cheapest. Well, guess what, you're not going to get your mark then. So just make sure that you read through all of those things. The other thing I found is sometimes I kind of don't read the question properly. So you miss a key word in the question, then you're reading the answers, and you think, oh, that's got to be the answer. Then you read some of the other answers, and you're thinking, hey, wait, normally there's only 1 or 2 at most answers that you can eliminate. The other 2 or 3 normally are close or close enough. If like 3 out of the 4 answers are just making absolutely no sense, it may be that you haven't actually read the question properly. No harm in going back, rereading the question, and just making sure. And then you come back to the answers and see whether the one you thought was the right one actually is, or whether perhaps one of the other ones comes into it. The quickest way to lose marks is to not read the question properly, or read half the question and think you know what the question is. Meanwhile, the second half of the question changes what the first half is saying. So make sure we read the entire of the question and all of the answers. Okay, then there was a little bit of a discussion in one of the hints and tips saying that CISA is an objective exam, and it's not really, it's not a reflection on you as a person. You can't take anything personally here. Okay, it's not a reflection of your talent, your capabilities, competencies, or skills. It's an exam that's written in a certain way with a certain style, and you need to get into like that exam technique. You need to get that knack of answering the ISACA questions. Okay, so if you go and write the exam and you don't get through it, don't give up. Don't see it as being a failure. Put it down to experience. That maybe you've never written an ISACA exam before. You didn't know what to expect. You didn't know about the venue, the noise, or something there distracting you. Learn from all of those things, and make sure that if you go, or when you go and do it again, that you take all those things into account, and it's a positive learning experience. Okay, and use it to get you into the knack. That you now can say, well, hey, you know what? The questions in the exam were fairly similar to the ones in the database, or no, they were completely different, and I'm not used to this, and I must change the way I study. I didn't find it personally vastly different from what was in the database. They're different questions, but they're in the same vein. Okay? It's not something that just comes and blindsides you. Okay. Then they say learn to play the CISA game. Okay? It's not just about the knowledge. You find that there are people who've got 15, 20 years experience, partners in audit firms and the like, and they think, oh, no, I need to go and write this CISA exam because we need a few more CISAs in the organization because the Auditor General is looking for them or somebody needs something. So they go and write the exam and they don't put enough effort in, those guys are always busy, and then they fail. And then they go, oh, hell, okay, this was unexpected. I'm a partner, I should have passed this thing. I do this thing day in, day out, but I failed. Okay? And that's going to happen. If you don't prepare for the exam, you're going to fail it. And those guys aren't in the kind of the right mind frame. They haven't been through the sample questions. They haven't looked at what does that knowledge base look like. So they're now going to fail this thing. Okay? So don't worry about all of that. You've been preparing for it. You've been doing those things. It puts you an advantage to those guys who haven't been doing that. Okay? And then also importantly, have an open mind. Yeah. You're coming across a lot of knowledge through the review guide and through the questions and answers. And the first time you answer the question, you could be using your previous experience and how you feel about things, perhaps the methodology that your audit firm is using, whatever it might be. If you get the question wrong, you need to be open-minded about those answers and read and absorb those answers so that if you come across that again, the second time round, you're going to use the knowledge that you've gained from getting it wrong the first time to get it right the second time. Okay? You're not learning if you're getting the same question wrong 2 or 3 times. That's not really helpful. You need to have that open mind to absorb that knowledge. Okay, then on the day when you're sitting in the venue, if you're writing essay-based questions, often your lecturers will tell you, well, just read the entire question paper so that your mind can absorb your 3 or 4 questions that you've got, and while you're answering the first question, your subconscious can be pulling out the knowledge needed to answer those other questions. This is not one of those exams. Okay, you've got 200 questions. Each of those questions is pretty much its own encapsulated, isolated little question. So it's not going to help you to go and read the whole paper. All it's going to do is waste a whole ton of time. Okay? In reading the whole paper, you could have probably answered half the questions in that amount of time. So now you've just wasted half an hour or an hour out of the limited time that you have. So whatever you do, don't fall into the trap of trying to do that. It's really, really not going to help you. Okay? You just do this thing and you take it one question at a time. Treat each question completely separately. Okay? So when you're going through that, you have a look at each question individually, you read it, you think about it, you evaluate, you decide on an answer, and you write it down on your answer sheet. Okay? Some people like to answer on the question sheet first and later come back and transcribe. Okay? I wouldn't recommend that at all. All you're doing is wasting time, and at some point you're going to start thinking, oh, problem here, I'm running out of time, I need to start speeding up because I still need to find time to come back and transcribe these things. You don't want any of those kind of distractions. You know, if you've got your answer sheet there and you've got your question, read the questions, go through it. I then used to circle as I'm reading through the one that I think it is. So if I'm reading A, I cross out A and say, okay, A is not the answer. B, cross out B. C, circle it or put a question mark saying it's a possibility. Come down to D, no, D's a no. Okay, so A, B, and D are definite no's. C was the probable one, therefore I'm going to go with C. Okay, and you can do that on your question paper, but then immediately take that C and write it onto your answer sheet. Don't think I'll come back. Okay, so then what do you do if you don't know an answer? Okay, you can read through the things, well, I don't really know, or maybe I'm not quite sure, or it's asking something that I'm not familiar with. Some people say leave it out and flag it and come back, and you can do that. I reckon, based on your quick reading of it, take a guess as to what you think it might be. Okay. Flag the question so that you know that this one you want to come back later and spend a bit more time on, but take a guess anyway and put that guess down on there. Okay. If you start leaving blanks, you might get out of sequence and start answering the questions in the wrong places. And if you don't have enough time and you end up running out of time at the end, at least you've got a 1 in 4 chance of having got that thing right. If you've left it blank, you've got no chance of having got it right. Okay? So by all means, flag it in the question paper, so come back to this one, but fill an answer. Okay? Also, the one guy was saying psychologically, if you start leaving blanks all over your answer sheet, when you look down at this answer sheet, and you start to get yourself into a bit of a panic, into a bit of a tease, and that'll affect your mindset and cause you to get more answers wrong as you're going along. So you don't want to be doing that. You need to try and stay positive through this whole thing. Okay. There's a comment saying don't carry doubts over to the next question. You need to often in your mind compartmentalize. You've got a question, you've put your answer. If you're a little unsure, you've flagged it and you might come back to it. Then move on. Don't kind of think, oh no, that question back there, maybe I didn't put the right answer. Let me just go back and read it again. You go and you read it again, and then you're bouncing between things. Don't do that. Just take these things in order. Once you flag something as potentially come back to, leave it. Keep reading, and then go back at the end and look at it. Then coming back and changing answers. People say to me, hey, you know what, you left with more than an hour and a half to spare. Why didn't you go back and read all of your questions and answers? Maybe you could have changed some of those things, and maybe you could have got 100% for more of the questions or more of the sections in the exam. I don't really believe this idea of going back and changing things. One of the things we said earlier was don't try to overanalyze the questions. And sometimes when you've now got lots of time to go back and you've got these difficult questions that you're thinking, should I, shouldn't I, could be this. Well, what happens if the examiner was thinking that now you've got way too much time, you're going to overanalyze all of those. And I really don't believe that you're going to actually end up getting a better answer. For maybe you'll get 3 more right, but 4 more wrong. I don't know. But that's my view. If there's questions where you really took a complete flyer, then you can go back and look at those ones. But try and have those ones kind of pre-marked so that when you've got your little bit of time left over at the end, you come back only to those ones. You don't start at the beginning of the paper again and go through them all. You're likely to make more of a mess. And then where you do actually want to go and change an answer, just be careful when you're doing it, because you need to very carefully rub out the mark that you had put there previously so that you can actually remark a new one. But there can't be any lead marks from your pencil left in the old circle. Because when the computer marks this thing, that scanner, if it picks up marks in 2 of the bubbles, okay, then you've double answered a question. And when you double answer a question, you don't get any marks for it. Okay? So you're better off guessing and have a complete guess when you've got a 25% chance of getting a mark for something, than putting one and then rubbing it out and putting another one and rubbing it out and putting another one and end up, this thing picks up 2 different, now you get 0% chance. Okay? So that's not good. They do also recommend that when you're reading through, sometimes one question almost gives you the answer to a previous question. Okay? So in the question itself, they might give you some additional info or help you understand a concept or something. And then you think, oh, that question way back there, the way I answered it is wrong. This here actually tells me how to answer that. Okay? That might be a reason to go back and change an answer. In that case, you might then want to just go back, flag that previous one, or even at that point, if you can find it quickly enough, just go back, find it, read it, change, and then carry on. But don't use that, don't do it too often, and don't let that distract you from your focus and rhythm. You're not going to get into much of a rhythm if you're bouncing it around all the time. Okay. The next thing is where to start in the paper. Some people say, well, start at question 50 or start at 100 or whatever it might be. I don't know. I don't really buy into that. I just start at question 1 and just go through this thing. You know, if there's a reason and something works for you, I'm not going to say don't do it. But if there's no real reason, I don't know. When you look at the actual answer page, on the front of the page, kind of put a whole lot of personal information, your name, the exam venue, the country, all that kind of stuff. And then there's space, I think, for about 50 questions. When you turn it over, and on the back, there's space for about 150. So you could start at question 51 if you like, and then start straight on the back. But I'm still not sure what the benefit of doing that might be. So if somebody can come up with a good one, go through it. Otherwise, seriously, just start at question 1. Then, you know, I'm going to repeat this because it's definitely worth repeating. Read the questions carefully. You know, every word in the question has meaning, and it can change completely what they're asking or how they're expecting you to answer the question. Then even if you know the answer after having read the question, read all 4 of the answers before committing to one. There can be more than one answer, and you have to choose the most correct. So simply seeing the first correct answer, that isn't necessarily the answer. We've been through it with the exam techniques. Take each of the answers and kind of go, yes, no, maybe, across all of them. And when you end up with 2 yeses, go back and look and pick the most correct one. If you've got 3 no's and a maybe, well, then your maybe is more than likely the real answer. If you've got 1 yes and 2 maybes, well, then the yes is your answer. So it all depends on what's in the content there. But stick to your exam technique and keep using it all the way through. And we'll just repeat it again. There are no penalties for wrong answers. Okay? Don't leave any marks on the table. Blank answers, by the time you've finished the exam and they tell you pencil down, blank answers are wasted answers. Okay? You've got 10 blanks, that's 2.5 marks that you could have had. And if you get really lucky, maybe even 3 or 4. So don't leave those marks on the table. Okay. And when you're guessing, at least eliminate the ones that you know are wrong answers or not applicable ones, and guess between what's left. You can bump that kind of guess factor up to a 50-50, and then you're well on your way. So one of the guys put forward a theory saying that almost all of the questions will have one answer that's kind of like a distractor, as they call it. So there's one answer framed as being a distractor. The intention being that if somebody really doesn't know the subject matter, they're going to somehow be drawn to that answer, even though it's a wrong answer. It's an answer that just kind of sounds cool or sounds right, when if you actually know the material, you know that's just no way, that's completely wrong. So eliminate that one first. So then you're down to 3 possible answers, and then from there work your way through. I think it's kind of almost inherent in the exam technique that we've been building up, but nonetheless worth saying, you know, chances are you're going to find one of those kind of answers in most of the questions that you're looking at. Okay, then it's better to record answers directly on the answer sheet rather than recording on the question and transcribing. We've spoken around that. It's saving time, prevents you from losing marks from not having answered stuff. Okay, there again, if you modify an answer, ensure you erase your previous answer. You know, it's worth investing some money in stationery before you go into this thing. You know, buying a box of 6 pencils from the spa is going to cost you like $15, and erasers are probably like $10 each. So if you spend $40 on that, it's worthwhile, even if it ends up getting you 5 marks that you might not otherwise get. You don't want to miss this thing by 2 or 3 marks and then have to spend another 5,000 Rand, however many dollars it is, because you didn't want to go and spend 30 or 40 Rand on pencils. Okay? You don't want to be caught out like that. In the last exam I was in, the lady sitting behind me, she didn't have an HB pencil, and they're insisting now you must have an HB pencil when you write this thing. You know, I had a whole pack. I just handed one over to her and said, "There we go. You know, don't stress about it. Focus on the exam." But you don't want to be in that position. You don't need any of that unnecessary stress. So concentration comes and goes, and it is going to come and go. And you mustn't expect anything otherwise. You know, we don't live in a perfect world. Your exam venues aren't soundproofed. You know, last time in the exam venue there was a little bit of noise from outside. I don't know if they were mowing the lawn or what was going on. In one of the previous exams there was some construction going on outside somewhere. So you can have a lot of noise in the exams. We need to get used to that. Okay? You don't want to use that as an excuse not to do well in the exam and then complain about this and that. It's not going to help anybody.
Too cold.
Yeah, look, the venue at Edgewood there is kind of, if it's the same one as it was last year, it was an upstairs kind of classroom with open windows. I don't think there was aircon or anything like that. We are writing in the winter now, so it won't be too hot. Take a jersey or something that you can take on and off, you can unzip or rezip, that you can control the temperature yourself. And have that available as an option. Chances are you won't need it, unless the cold front hits or something. But that should have cleared by then, although I don't know how long it's going to hang around. But yeah. So take short breaks when you need to, even if you're taking a break, just closing your eyes for a minute in your chair, getting up, going to the bathroom, whatever it might be. But take those breaks to keep your concentration level high. Then if you're prone to distraction, then accept the earplugs that the invigilator is going to offer you. If you're really, really prone to distraction, go and buy yourself a decent pair of earplugs and take it with. So not active earphones connected to a music system or something. You're not allowed to bring anything like that into the venue. But just plain earplugs that fit in your ear and just block out all the noise in that. That can be quite helpful. In the last exam, the invigilator did offer those to us. So I think I took a pair and just kept it there in case I didn't end up using them. But I had them as an option. Okay. It's quite a nice idea. I don't know if they do that all around the world, but it was definitely offered here in South Africa last time. Okay. Then when you encounter familiar questions, don't be prejudiced by your past learnings and experience. Read the question, read the answer. Make sure that nothing has changed in that question before you just automatically choose the answer. There are going to be questions that you're going to read it and you're just going to know the answer. And that's fine, and there's no harm. You don't need to sit and look for the trick question in it. Okay? Read it, read all of it, answer it. You've seen when we've been doing the sample question, sometimes the question is like 10 lines long and you've got to read it very, very carefully and dissect all the words. And sometimes the question is like half a line long and the answer is all very short and you can read it and come up with your answer immediately. So don't waste time unnecessarily. Pick the answer when you know it, but just make sure you've read everything. Okay. So earlier we said don't overcomplicate questions, don't look for hidden tricks that aren't there. At the same time, one of the people giving hints and tips for the exam said, every single word counts in the questions and the proposed answers. So read all the words. Don't skim read and skip stuff. It's going to get you into trouble. And I like the wording that they've given us here. The questions created, or the question creators, so the people creating the questions, are skilled at using clever syntax and semantics. Okay? They know language. The questions have been moderated and checked by other people. So the constructs of the question are important. Okay? And they do that to create a challenge for you. Not everything is going to be easy. So accept that challenge, embrace that challenge, read the question, read all the words, eliminate the wrong answers and come up with the correct answers. Okay? Ensure you mark your answers accurately. You don't want to be thinking A and writing C onto the paper or writing it into the wrong row. That's unnecessary. You want to make sure that all the knowledge that's in your head gets applied to those questions, to those answers, and ends up in your paper. Okay. Then make sure you completely fill in the answer circles. So for each answer, you've got your pencil. You can't just put a tick in it or put a cross in it. You've actually got to fill in that complete circle. Okay? So sometimes having a pencil that's too sharp doesn't necessarily help you. Because now you've got a very fine line that you're putting there, and it's going to take you ages to scribble and do that thing. So as you're going through the exam, your pencil will get a little blunter, and that actually makes it a little easier to fill in those circles quicker. I wouldn't worry about trying to resharpen my pencil every 20 questions. It might just end up costing you a whole lot more time to sharpen your pencil and to actually keep answering those questions. Okay. Then check regularly that you aren't going out of alignment. You know, there'd be nothing worse than answering 10 or 15 questions or even more, looking across and suddenly finding out that, I'm supposed to be on question 151, but I've just filled that into block number 149 or into block 152, and looking up and finding somewhere along the line you've gone out of alignment. Okay? Because then to have to rub a whole section out and redo that, you could end up not rubbing things out properly and end up getting 0 marks for those ones because you've multiple answered or whatever you might do, and you're wasting time as well. So it's certainly worth checking, maybe at least every 10 questions or so, just confirming that you're aligned. The other thing that can work quite nicely is to have a ruler. So keep a ruler with you and just move it down, because then you can very easily see that, yes, I'm on question 10, and this is answer line 10, and you just move it down as your answer. I found that works quite nicely for me. But see what works for you. Okay, so then moving a little bit more onto the actual day itself. So the first thing is prepare an exam kit, so that you've got your pencils, you've got your eraser, you've got your admission ticket, you've got everything sorted. Don't leave this stuff to the last minute. When I wrote the CGEIT exam up in Joburg, I was struggling for time. I was busy with a whole lot of things. I remember driving around to the BP garage at like 8:30 on the night before the exam, trying to find somewhere to buy a pencil, and ended up asking at the counter, they're saying, do you guys sell stationery? And the guy's like, no, sorry, we don't keep that stuff. And I'm like, heck, saying, I've got an exam tomorrow. Do you have any idea like where I can just get a pencil from? He says, oh, you just need a pencil. We'll go look at the magazine counter. That one magazine over there comes with a free pencil. Okay? So I bought 4 of those magazines to get my 4 pencils. Okay? You don't want to be doing that kind of nonsense. It's much easier now. It's a week ahead of time. When you're going doing your grocery shopping at Pick and Pay or Spar or whatever it is, just go and pick up a pack of those pencils. Zubair was suggesting maybe for the exam, you can go off and buy a box of like 20 pencils, and everybody can just chip in a little bit and have some pencils or something. But you know, if you guys want to do that, that's cool too. But use this mock exam on Saturday as the practice to get your whole exam kit together. Then you know you've got it, and then a week down the line, there's no problems. And keep some space in your car if you need to, just in case. Okay, then have a valid government-issued ID document. Okay, if you don't have an identity document, you're not going to be allowed to write the exam. Okay, they do accept a driver's license as ID, but I think between driver's license, South African ID document, or your passport, one of those 3 will be acceptable. Elsewhere in the world, I'm not sure what particular people use, so government-issued ID is a requirement, otherwise you can't write the exam. Okay, then visit the venue in advance. Know the route, know the traffic. Know how long it's going to take you to get there. Okay, so for you guys, it's at Edgewood again. Okay, check what the exam ticket says. Check what it says in terms of the rooms and all that kind of stuff. Okay, make sure you know how long it's going to take you to get there. Which route you're going to go. You're going to go up the M13. You're going to go up the M3. Where do you turn off? When you get there to the venue, you go in through the main gate. Which parking do you need to go and park in? When you get there on the day, the security guards may not be all that helpful. When you get to the main gate, and if you ask them, where do you need to go, they may not actually have a clue. You know, last time it took me about 15 minutes of driving around before I actually found a parking where I could park. I found a security lady who then helped me, and I parked like on the other side of the building from where I needed to be. So it was quite a long walk up 4 flights of stairs and all the way along. Other people had parked in the car park right there where it was. So if you've been to that varsity before and you know where everything is, cool. If you haven't, it might even be worth taking a drive there a day or two in advance, or even over this weekend coming or something, just so you know which parking lot to park in and where to go in and where to actually get to the venue. You don't want to be messing that up. There were some people who actually went to UKZN, to the Howard College campus, instead of coming to the Edgewood campus. Get to Howard College, there's nobody there, there's no signage, there's absolutely nothing. Phone a friend who says, what are you doing at Howard College? This exam is actually in Edgewood. And then they got in their car, rushed all the way up to Edgewood, got there like just in time. But now you're running, you're sweating, you're distracted. That's the last thing you need before you're writing an exam. So don't let those kind of things mess you up. Get to the venue early, that way you can relax and chill. If you still got some crib notes that you want to go through, some key concepts and that's fine. Do that there, do it in your car, whatever, but just be there with plenty of time. Make sure you have your admission ticket now already. If you don't have your admission ticket, get hold of ISACA urgently. They post those things out quite far in advance, so all of you guys have got yours. Everybody online, if you don't have it, get hold of ISACA quickly and get that ticket. Without that, you're not going to be able to write the exam. Then at the exam itself, they go through quite a process of explaining to you what the exam's all about, what the processes are, what you can do, what you can't do, what you're allowed in the venue with you, all that kind of stuff. Once the chief examiner starts going through all of that stuff, nobody else is going to be let into the venue. So make sure you're there with plenty of time to spare. You don't want to be standing outside listening to all of this and they're not letting you in. Okay. If there's any doubts of any of the procedures or how you're filling in the sample sections of paper, your name or anything, ask the chief examiner. They can help you with that kind of stuff. Okay? They know nothing about the actual subject matter at hand. So if the question isn't making sense or you think a word is wrong or something, they can't help you. Not only are they not allowed to help you, they're not qualified to help you because they don't know that subject matter. And that's intentional. So your chief examiner can only answer procedural questions that you might have. You can leave the venue during the exam for breaks. Normally they don't want multiple people leaving at the same time. So 2 of you can't leave and go and have a chat in the bathroom. That won't be allowed. So also be aware that if you think you might need a break sometime soon, just be aware of who's where, who's asked to go out, so that you're not getting to a point where you're thinking, okay, I'm going to just wait, I'm going to wait and wait, and you're busting to go to the loo, and now somebody gets up and goes ahead of you. That's just wasting time. It's non-productive. Okay, plan it a little bit where you can, so that you know, okay, I want to go in about 5 minutes or so. Somebody's already out. Let me just answer another question or two. They've come back in, go pencil down, ask, go, and you're out of there. Okay, you're not wasting time unnecessarily. Don't leave the exam venue without notifying the examiner. Okay? They make a record of who's left when, and they kind of give you permission to leave. If you leave without permission, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And you don't want anything like that. That's not necessary. Now, all of the exam rules and that say that you can't bring any food or drinks into the exam venue. Okay? I've not really experienced that. I've seen some of the chief examiners allow you to bring some stuff in, but it's got to be small things that are not going to disturb anybody else. You know? It's not cool cracking a can of Coke halfway through the exam and you hear that sound kind of echo through the room. Not good. Okay. If you bring water, bring still water, bring it in a small bottle. Chances are the examiner will allow you to have that there. Don't bring a 2-liter Coke and cups and all sorts of stuff. Okay. And then they also allow things like dried fruit and a few things like that. But again, in small quantities, in non-crinkly packets that don't need to be opened and disturb other people. I think they're going to look at this and kind of make an assessment. And if it's like, no, this is not going to work, it's going to disturb other people, then it won't be allowed. So just be careful and don't be too upset if they say to you, no, you can't do that, because the rules say you can't do that. But they try and be reasonable. You know, certain people are diabetic or whatever the case is, they've got to keep their blood sugar up and that kind of stuff. And having a sip of water just keeps you going and just doesn't disturb other people. So have a look at that, bring some stuff, but don't be too upset if they don't allow it. Okay. Then have a drink and a snack like an energy bar or something before the exam. It's quite a long exam. If you go in there, you're too nervous to have eaten breakfast or anything like that, and then you go there, by the time 4 hours is done, your sugar levels are going up and down, you're all over the place, it's going to affect your concentration levels. If you normally have breakfast, have breakfast. If you normally don't have breakfast, well, then don't try and have a big breakfast. That's going to put you out of kilter as well. But have an energy bar or something before you go in there. Have something to drink so you're not thirsty 10 minutes into the exam. But also don't drink 2 liters of water and then you need to be getting up and going to the loo every few minutes. That's also just wasting time. Bring along some kind of small bag or something like that. We all carry cell phones, we've got car keys, all that kind of stuff. I don't want big tog bags and all sorts of stuff being built into the exam venue, but if you bring a small bag, you can put your keys, your cell phone, all that kind of stuff. You leave it at the front by the invigilators. They look after that for you. You can't keep it at your desk. They're not going to allow that. Okay, so that's another thing. These days, not very many people wear watches. Okay, I sometimes wear a watch, sometimes don't. Many years ago, my cell phone became a replacement for a watch. Now with smartwatches, it's changing a little bit. But if you use your cell phone to keep track of time, in the exam, you're not going to be able to keep your cell phone. So you can't use that to keep track of time. So you're either going to use what the invigilator provides in terms of their clock and writing on the board, or bring a watch or something that you can. You can't use your cell phone for that. In the exam is a closed exam. You're not allowed to discuss any of the questions and answers with anybody else. So don't sit there and memorize, think, okay, well, now I'm finished, I've got an hour to spare, I'm going to memorize the exam paper, come out afterwards, write all the questions down and sell them. You won't be very popular with ISACA, and it's against the terms of the writing of the exam. Then after the completion of the exam, once you're finished, then leave silently, don't disturb anybody else, try and be polite to your fellow people. And generally, they don't like you to leave in the last half hour of the exam. There's admin type stuff to be taken care of and all that, so just be aware of that. If you have a specific requirement and you know you can finish the exam in 2 hours and you've got another appointment that you need to be at, don't wait until right at the end and then decide to leave. Either leave in your own time and you're good. Okay, so then we're into the kind of final period now, the last kind of week and a half before the exam. So I'm calling it that final revision push, making the most of the bit of time that you have left. So the most important thing in your life right now is the CD database or the online questions database. You should be very intimate friends with that database by now. Okay. The way I did it, and I would recommend to anybody to do, is configure the system to only ask you questions that you haven't had before. Okay, and then try and do it in batches of 50 to 100 at a time. You need to be getting used to concentrating for longer periods and writing for that longer periods. Doing it 20 at a time is not really going to help you in that respect. If you can configure it to do 50 or 100 at a time, it'll help you, and you can see how you're doing for those longer periods. Okay? Then try and answer the questions as best as you can, but also try and stick to the time limits. So don't be spending 2 or 3 minutes on a question. Okay? Maximum minutes on a question, aim for maybe 40, 45 seconds, unless there's a huge amount of text to read, in which case you need to make sure you read it all. Okay? And then answer the question, look at whether you got it right or wrong. If you got it wrong, read through what's there and then move on. Read enough that you can remember and make sure that if you got the same question again, you would get it right. Don't necessarily, at this stage, be sitting there looking at it going, where did this come from in the book, and what about this, and what about that? Just read it, absorb it, accept it, and move on, because you've probably still got a whole lot of questions to get through. There's not a lot of time. You can't be spending 10 or 15 minutes per question. It's more important that you get through all of those unanswered questions than it is that you know exactly where the answer came from in terms of which book or which standard or framework or whatever it might be. Then do maybe 3 to 4 of those batches. So you've now accumulated a whole lot. Then go and switch the configuration to say to it, now give me all the ones I got wrong last time. And go through those ones again to make sure that you've remembered why it is that you got it wrong and what would actually give you the right answer. Okay, so if you do, let's say 300 questions and you get 50 wrong, now when you do this one, it'll only give you those 50 questions. and hopefully you get 40 of those 50 questions right. A repeat that, it'll give you just those 10. Do them again. At that stage, you should now get those ones right. Now it's flagged that those are correctly answered questions. So when you ask again to say, give me the questions I got wrong, there should be none. And you move back to saying, give me new questions again. Okay? And then you repeat those steps until you've finished that entire database. Okay? And as you're going through it, you'll get an indication of how you're doing. It kind of gives you that tracker that tells you how far you're doing in terms of all of those questions in the database. So you get an idea. When you're going through and doing this for a long time, that thing doesn't move so nicely. It's not always so accurate in terms of telling you how many. At some stage, you might think, I'm never ever going to get through this thing. Just keep at it. And then suddenly it'll start flying through towards the end. Then also during this kind of revision time period, review your notes, those things that you marked as being important that you weren't quite remembering, those key concepts, and review that glossary. Possibly even print out the glossary and have it with you when you're doing some of these questions, because that might help you. If you don't know what a term is, and sure, in the exam you're not going to have the glossary, but while you're doing these questions, you can read up, see what the definition is, and go, okay, cool, now I know what that is, and then go through that. Okay. So that then really is the main kind of items that I have to share about the exam. There's nothing to be worried about in terms of the exam day itself. It's fairly well organized. It's quite slick. The invigilators are kind of professionally hired to do this. They come there, they do it, they hand their stuff, and they go back to their day jobs. They want it to be effective and efficient. They kind of get evaluated. When you complete the exam, you get a chance to answer questions, almost like a mini quiz about how the exam venue was and all that, whether there's anything that disturbed you, all that kind of stuff. And the ISACA uses that information to correlate it across all the participants in that particular exam. And if an invigilator is not up to scratch or a venue is not up to scratch, well, then they're going to do something about it. So that's your opportunity then, if you're not happy with the venue, to put that info down. And those guys don't want a negative evaluation either. So they're going to professionally handle things and do the best they can for you and for ISACA. Okay. So then I just included this slide again. We had it in one of our earlier sessions, just again reminding you of the breakdown between the different domains. The exam date, if you don't know, I know you should all know the exam date, 13th of June. Okay, hopefully it's lucky 13 in this case. Okay, for our exam, 200 multiple choice questions, 5 domains. You need to know those task statements, okay, and those knowledge statements. Okay, and then the 5 domains, now you're familiar with that. Okay, so when we started off, we had these 10 steps to acing the exam. I'm not going to go through all of those now in detail. Some of them is too late now. It was appropriate at the beginning when we started all of this. Join a study group. You guys have done that, so that's great. For anybody still writing a future exam, find a study group, make a study group, whether it's online or local. Get other people to study with you. It makes the whole journey a whole lot easier. There's nothing worse than being alone through this whole thing. You don't need to be alone.
Very good. Yeah. How many people hope to do the assembly? Was it a big class on this side or all over?
It was a fairly smallish class thing. So in the past one, it was at Howard College campus. It was in the main ref, which was a very large venue. It's a much, much smaller venue now.
And all 4 of the guys, right?
So it was CISA, CRISC, CGEIT, CISM. I think there were about 6 or 7 guys who wrote CISM. There was maybe 1 or 2 who wrote CGEIT, maybe 5 who wrote CRISC. And then CISA was the most popular of their exams. And I guess at 20 to 30 people.
So about 15 or max.
Maximum 50 if
less.
Yeah, so this exam's probably less than the December exam. But yeah, I wouldn't expect all that many people. In Joburg, higher numbers, probably 200 people plus in the room. But in Durban here, it's a fairly small venue. which is why they don't have a September exam. There's just not enough numbers to justify it, to pay the invigilators and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's fairly small numbers here, and that'll vary, country to country,
Yeah.
and location to location.
And seasons as well.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Probably see you.
How was Joburg?
Joburg was okay. Presentation went well, and it was good. Some good presentations there as well.
Okay.
So hopefully they'll all be available for download sometime soon.
Okay.
Okay. We've been going through study tips and study techniques and stuff. We have been recording it online, so you can go back to YouTube and just
Okay.
watch the whole lot. We're fairly close to the end of that kind of study tips and techniques side of things. So I think let's finish off on that. Then I've got some questions that Zubair sent me from the last day or two when he's been going through a whole lot of things. We can go through those. If you have additional questions, we can add them to the ones that Zubair has. If you mail them to me, then you've got my email address there. Yeah, cool. So mail those through to me, and then we can add that to the list, and we can go through those just now as well. Yeah. So, okay. At the beginning of all these sessions, we spoke about the approach to the studies and what you need to actually be successful in this. The CISA study guide is essential. Without that CISA review manual, you're not really going to be successful. You don't necessarily need the 2015 one. The 2014 one is just fine. The 2013 one's okay-ish. When you get back to 2012 and beyond, then the differences become more and more and more. But 2014, 2015, those are absolutely fine. You need questions, lots and lots of questions. I wouldn't go with non-ISACA questions. I would start with all the official questions, either the CD or the online database. That's the best way to do it. And yeah, the more questions you can get through there, the better. Preferably you get through all of those questions before the exam date. Okay. And then just a reminder to everybody in terms of the domains and the marks and the percentages. The most important chapters are chapters 4 and 5. So your information system operations, maintenance support, and protection of information assets. Those two chapters make up 53% of their exam. Okay. So these last couple of weeks of study have been very important, and you'll see that when you start going through random questions out of the database, that those ones come up more than all the others.
Yeah.
It's because they form the biggest part of their exam. Okay. Okay, I just want to flip back very quickly to the discussion we had around Saturday. So the plan on Saturday is to do a sample exam. Through discussion, we kind of had two options: either try and do 100 questions and start at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, or do a 200 question, try and do a full mock exam starting at 7 o'clock. And the consensus was that we start at 7 and we do a full 200 question mock exam. So we write from 7 through to 11, and then we spend from 11 to 12 discussing how it went, the questions, the answers, all of that. And then it leaves you the afternoon to get on with either family commitments or to get on and do more studies. If we start later in the day, it's going to take out the whole of the morning and the whole of the afternoon. So although it's an early start, it's the best option given the timing that we have. So we'll do that here. We'll get hold of a sample paper, put it together, have photocopies of that available. For the exam itself, you're going to need a pack of information. So your exam ticket, you need some pencils, you need some erasers. Put that pack of all of those things together, bring it on Saturday, and you can use that as your trial run for the exam. And then the following week, you just take that along with you to the real exam. So you've got everything ready and together. going to move on to some questions and answers now. Zubair mailed me one earlier, so I've got that preloaded up here. Okay. So I've been doing lots of talking, so now it's your guys' turn to have a look at the questions, talk through the questions, talk through those answers, and then let's see what the actual answer is. Can everybody see from there? I can't really move this too much closer down the table. Shall I try and zoom it a bit more? Okay, that's probably about as big as I can make it at this stage.
The pass mark is 55%, right?
There's no real pass mark per se, because they end up giving you this kind of score. So your score can be anything between 200 and 800, and 450 is the mark that's needed to get through. But it's not a percentage that's directly attributable to certain questions in that.
No, the reason I'm asking is that for a different exam, the CIA exam, you are expected to get 75%, or I think it's 400 out of the 800, 500, I think. Yeah, 500 out of the 700. And on that one, when you are busy studying, the guide is always to say, by the time you go and write the exam, these sessions, these sessions that you do, you must at least get 10% more than what you expected at the exam, because there will be an element of the exam that stuff that just sort of
floors you on the day, catches you.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and I think that principle is pretty much sound. It's hard to tell you exactly what you need in terms of that. If I look at what I was getting just before the exam, it was fluctuating between 80% and 90%.
Yeah.
Okay. And I did really well in the exam, so I don't think there's anything that kind of tells you exactly what you need to be. I would hope that by the time you're kind of doing those last few sessions there, you're getting around about the 80% kind of mark. By next week Thursday. There we go. If you're getting around the 50-60% mark, it's not saying that you can't get third in the exam, but you shouldn't be overconfident.
Yeah.
Rather try and see if you can't put some more time in then and get through those questions. Okay. So, who wants to have a go at reading the question and the answers for us and eliminating some of the incorrect ones?
Okay. Question says, which of the following ways is the best for an IS auditor to verify that critical production servers are running the latest security updates released by the vendor? We're talking see if the latest security updates, that's what they are running. So A, ensure that automatic updates are enabled on critical production servers. That's A. B, verify manually that the patches are applied on a sample of production servers. C, review the change management log for critical production servers. D, run an automated tool to verify the security patches on production servers.
Okay, so maybe just run through some of those answers then. A, ensure that automatic updates are enabled on critical production servers. Yes, no?
Yes.
I'm hearing a yes, I'm hearing a no. Okay, let's hear some reasoning behind this. Why yes, why no?
I know, because some patches you don't just enable automatic, because some patches might be good for the system, some might crash the system. You need to level them first before you can release. So automatic is dangerous for me.
Okay, so just to summarize, then automatic patches can be dangerous to critical production servers. Okay, you would want to probably test them first in a test lab if you have it. If you don't have a test lab, at very least you would want to be executing it at a time that's not going to cause business interruption. A lot of these patches require reboot as well. So you've got automatic patching in place. You know, what level of automation? Is it automatically download, automatically apply, automatically reboot? You wouldn't want it during your peak times to be like that. Okay, so that answer, as much as it sounds like a great answer, actually is a bad answer from that perspective practically. And the other thing is also that simply having it enabled doesn't necessarily mean the patches have been successfully downloaded and implemented. So it doesn't actually tell you then, or it doesn't help you verify that it's running the latest patches. So A, it's not good for the business to do that, and B, it doesn't answer the question. Okay.
I vote B.
Okay, so if we look at B, verify manually that the patches are applied on a sample of production servers. It sounds like a reasonable answer because you wouldn't necessarily have to test all servers. If we look at the question, it's saying verify that critical production servers are running the latest. So one could argue that you could sample. Sampling may not necessarily tell you that's the state for all, but it's reasonable. Saying verify manually, manual verification of patches is not so easy to do.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you take a Windows, let's say 2003 server or something like that, there's probably 200 to 300 patches that Microsoft have released over the period.
Yeah.
And it's saying the latest one, so you could potentially go and just get the latest month's worth of patches and see if those have been applied. But it's manual is not easy to do. But it doesn't mean it's not possible. If we look at C, review the change management log for critical production servers. You should be logging a change every time you put through patches. Having a change logged doesn't necessarily mean the patches have been successfully applied. So you may have logged the change, intended to do it, forgotten to do it, or tried to and it didn't work, and then you didn't log the change as having failed and you haven't redone it. So I don't think it tells you then whether they have or haven't been applied. And then D, run an automated tool to verify the security patches on production servers. I think that if you have a tool available and you can do it and it's not going to disrupt production and you've got permission to do it, it's probably the easiest way to do it. So in a Windows environment, something like Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer is fairly unobtrusive. It can download the entire patch database and quite quickly check the entire database against the patches that should be there and tell you what's going on. So D is probably the easiest way to do it and the most effective.
Best. So my manual is kicked because it's not best, but
yeah. Let's see what the official answer says. Okay. So correct answer is D.
Not my best. Yeah. Probably less effective doing manually. That's the B.
Yeah. So A is out. B can be done, but it's less effective.
Yeah.
And then they also talk about introducing Autodesk because you may not get it quite right. So you could miss something. And then D, yeah, the tool can help you do that. Okay. So that kind of process of going through the logic, you need to keep doing that, but you need to do it very quickly. So you've kind of got a minute to go through that entire process. Okay. So we've been doing it in slow motion. You need to do that at hyperspeed.
Yeah, so this question at 1 o'clock in the morning is the.
You've seen this question?
At 1 o'clock in
so
the
then
morning.
You should know the answer.
No, well, I was drowsy, but I remember at 1 o'clock looking and reading, and I'm like, no.
So maybe it's somewhere in your subconscious you have the answer. Okay. So, which of the following would be the best overall control for an internet business looking for confidentiality, reliability, and integrity of data? Okay, so A, secure sockets layer, So SSL. B, so not intrusion detection. C, public key infrastructure.
Oh, probably go for D.
D, VPN.
Go for D. Go for the network. So over the internet. D. So I'll go between A and C.
Okay, so we're hearing not B, and then so that leaves us with A, C, and D. And
I
we're
would
hearing
go
some
for
votes
D.
I'll go for D.
A, C, and D.
In my sleep.
So the lady who answered the question last night in her sleep is suggesting D. Does anybody want to phone a friend?
I'm supporting you.
Okay, so I've got 2 Ds and I've got a C. Everybody needs to put their votes in. Let's hear.
We need a vote.
Okay, so we've got 2 Cs, 2 Ds.
Yeah, C.
So we got 3 Cs, 2 Ds.
C
Uh-oh.
covered one thing, only C covered one thing.
Okay, so let's see.
Wow!
See, the thing is, we need to-
None of us will pass this exam.
There was this question in the last session.
It was slightly different.
No, I think because it's over the internet, so that's why I thought VPN
But you
cannot
see,
be because it's an
Like
They
internet.
are
Institution.
used in conjunction with SSL.
Yeah.
So that is why I'm
I was still not sure.
Yeah.
SSL can be called a type of VPN.
Yeah.
But
It is.
so if you look at what you see in place with Amazon and all these guys, what are they using? They're using SSL. They're using the HTTPS website with a little padlock in the corner, and
Yeah.
they're using that to provide confidentiality. Yeah. And okay, so we saw immunity IDS is not the one. The PKI is a little bit more complicated. You could use it, but now you've got to issue certificates. You're going to issue to all the end users if you're going to go that route. And then the VPN is normally to give individual people remote access to a network. So contractors, employees from the out of office, that kind of stuff. You're not likely to use a VPN when you're running an internet e-commerce type application. If you're wanting to host something on Microsoft's cloud solution in Ireland and you want to access it from your network here, yeah, you could use a VPN for that, but you're connecting network to network, not person to person. So
See, I was sleeping.
now you see, at least it's a good thing that you get an answer. You can see the answer again during your waking time.
Yeah.
Okay. In a client-server architecture, a domain name service is most important because it provides. So, what does the DNS give you? Name resolution, which does what? So it translates names into IP addresses. So it's an address book for the internet. Okay. But they're specifically telling us that we're on a client-server architecture. So we mustn't lose track of that. So DNS could give us the address of the domain server. Possible. B, it's resolution service for the name address. Yes, it does that. C, IP addresses for the internet. It does that. D, domain name system. Oh, I'm not quite sure what they're meaning by that, but it's kind of giving us a different definition from the one they gave us in the question, so that's a little bit confusing.
Domain name service, domain name system.
Domain name
This is a decoy, this thing.
So D could be a decoy, yeah. So which of those is the most important thing? Okay, the client-server architecture. I'm hearing an answer over there. So I'm hearing A, address of the domain server. Any other answers?
on to A and C. But C now, the problem is that client server architecture. Yeah, it sort of kicks it out, you see.
Yeah, client-server architecture doesn't have to be running over the internet. You could have.
That's what I'm saying. It kicks that word client server architecture that kicks out that idea now.
Yeah.
So we're left with no, not D. D is a decoy.
Yes, give the system to name if you look for something. Yes. Because
That's
without
that
that,
one thing that's gonna because of this we eliminate that straight away. From the initial session.
Yeah.
So I'm kicking out D.
You're kicking out D.
I'm kicking out C and D.
So kicking out C and D. So we're left with A and B. Are we? Pick one. Okay, so let's look at them. So
resolution for the child and of the name and address. Let's say B. Does the resolution.
okay, so I'm doing a fairly convincing B over this side. Any other votes?
It just goes though, but the most important.
So what are you saying is most important?
I'm listing the answer.
No, no, no. We're all the experts once we've seen the answer. So let's have a vote quickly before we do that.
I'll go for A, but address, name, address.
My gut
I
feeling.
would D.
My gut feeling says
You want D? D.
No,
if I
yeah.
had to choose randomly, I would go for D.
Okay. So I'm hearing A, B, and D. But the only
D will
convincing
kick
one
out.
I'm hearing is B.
Out.
I would go with B on this one. Because I'd go, well, you know, it's saying it's a client-server architecture. DNS is not related to your Windows domains. Your Windows domain controller could be a DNS server, but it doesn't have to be. You could have any Linux or Unix system acting as a DNS, and lots of people do. And it doesn't have to be connected to the internet. It could be a completely private network. So I'm eliminating the internet option. I'm eliminating D as a domain name system. I'm eliminating A because we don't necessarily have to have a domain server. And B, it's a resolution service for names and addresses. Well, that's what it does. So I'm going to go with B. But
D was a decoy.
let's see.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So the correct answer is B. Okay. So yeah. We don't read through all the answers. You can go back and check the video or look at it later. But they do explain each one of them and what role it plays in the system. Okay. Okay. So, an IS auditor determined that the IT manager recently changed the vendor that is responsible for performing maintenance on critical computer systems to cut costs. While the new vendor is less expensive, the new vendor or the new maintenance contract specifies a change in incident resolution time specified by the original vendor. Which of the following should be the greatest concern to the IS auditor? Okay. So let's just break down the question a little bit. So the IT manager's changed vendors responsible for performing maintenance. And it's not just any maintenance, it's maintenance on critical computer systems. The driving factor behind this was to save cost. Okay? So we're changing from one vendor to another to save cost. That in itself is fine, there's no issue with that, as long as they are equally good at doing their job and equally qualified to do it. Okay? And when you're dealing with vendors, your service level agreements is what defines what they're going to do. But now we don't have equal service level agreements. The new maintenance contract specifies a change in incident resolution time from what the original vendor specified. Okay? But we don't know now whether that change in incident resolution time is better or worse. It doesn't say that, it just says it's changed. The assumption is because it's cheaper, it's worse, but that may not be the case. So let's see what they're saying here. So option A, disaster recovery plans may be invalid and need to be revised. It's possible.
Possible, because in those plans you would have said what your
Incident
Yes,
resolution
yeah.
time is.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now if it's
You have
changed
based, yeah.
to the worse, then you may not be able to achieve what you said
Mm.
that you wanted to. So yeah, that's a problem. B, transactional business data may be lost in the event of system failure.
Doesn't
Doesn't
really.
necessarily mean that.
Yeah.
C, the new maintenance vendor is not familiar with the organization's policies.
No, we
They
don't
can be
have that,
familiarized,
yeah.
and there should be a way of onboarding new vendors. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue. D, application owners were not informed of the change. Well, I suppose out of courtesy, application owners should be informed, but you know, if
I
it's,
take A.
they do talk about the greatest concern. So A, DR plans are invalid and need to be revised. Yeah, I think that would be a
I'll take
fair risk
A.
and probably the highest
Yeah.
one. Oh, wow.
What? Okay. Data of making change in maintenance plan. And adverse impact on critical business process. How does it bring to something less expensive? Data must be aligned with the needs of the business.
Okay. So for A, they're saying yes, disaster recovery plans must support the needs of the business. But they're saying the greater risk is application owners are not aware of the change in resolution time.
So,
Okay.
so the critical
And so they're
guy is
saying then D, the greatest risk of making a change to the maintenance of critical systems is that the change could have an adverse impact on critical business processes. Which is, we were saying that, we just picked a different answer despite saying that. While there's a benefit in selecting a less expensive vendor, the resolution time must be aligned with the needs of the business. Which is true. At the same time though, nowhere in the question did it actually say that it's worse. But it could be worse, there's 50-50 that it's worse. So yeah, your business owner is critically important in these decisions. And if you're not consulting with the business owner, then you're making a mistake. So you must just remember that when looking at things. Okay. So in regard to moving an application program from the test environment to the production environment, the best control would be to have the, okay, so we're moving applications from test to production. Segregation of duties is always important. So taking that into account, who do we want to do what? Okay, do we want the application programmer to copy the source program and compiled object module to the production library? No. We don't want the application programmer to be able to do anything in production. B, the application programmer copy the source program to the production libraries and then have the production control group compile the program. That's better than A, because he's only copying the source code over and somebody else independent has to compile it and make it live. But it still implies that the application programmer has the ability to change the source code on the production environment, which would be undesirable, I think. Okay. C, production control group compiles the objects module to the production library using the source program in the test environment. Again, probably slightly better because now you've got an independent person doing it, but they're using the source program sitting in the test environment. And what control do we have over the source program sitting in the test environment? Could somebody have changed it without us knowing about it? So that one would worry me a whole lot. D, production control group copy the source program to production libraries and then compile the program. That would make the most sense.
Because
out of
now
all
it's
of those.
different, yeah.
Because they're independent from the programmers. They're moving the code into the production libraries. They're then compiling it in there so that we know that version of the code is the one that's being used and hasn't been tampered with. Sorry. What one are we going with? D? D. Let us see.
I'm shocked if you guys don't get it.
Correct answer is D. Okay. So we want production control group to copy the source program to production libraries and then compile it. Okay. So next question here. A database has suffered a catastrophic failure that caused the loss of all data since the last backup was done 4 hours earlier. Okay, fairly straightforward. How can the data for the last 4 hours be recovered promptly? So we've only done a backup 4 hours ago. We've lost the entire database. We can restore the backup, but now we've still got 4 hours of data missing. How are we going to get the 4 hours data back? A, the data cannot be recovered because there's no record of it since the last backup. It's quite a fatalistic view, and one would hope that's not the case.
Yeah.
Okay. Option B, through manual re-entry of all transactions for the past 4 hours. That's an option, and it's better than the fatalistic view of A.
If you don't have much happening in that 4 hours.
Okay. C, by applying the transaction logs to the latest backup of the database. Yes, if we have the transaction logs and we reapply it to the backup for that period, it will get us back to the current state. So that's one better than B. D, by rerunning the upstream applications that updated the database originally. Not really quite sure what they mean by that. And I'm not sure how we would synchronize it to ensure that we get all the correct data and we get the right data and that. So depending on the data architecture, it is a possibility, but if we had the transaction logs and we had the backup, why wouldn't we go with that option? Because that's what it's designed to do. So let's see what they're saying. Okay, correct answer is C. So whenever change is made to database, transaction log is created, which is stored locally, and may be stored offsite as remote journaling. These logs can be converted to SQL statements and used to restore the lost transactions. So that's the entire purpose of having that journal. And you'll notice in a lot of environments that they do, let's say, 4-hourly backups, but then every half hour they will actually go and back up these journal files. Because it's much smaller files, and it'll allow you to recreate all that stuff in between. If you lose the journal file, then you've got a problem. I think that might be the end of the questions. That's what they're saying forward. Next, you had some questions. Okay, let me go and check my mailbox quickly and see where those are, and then I can just open those up. Close your eyes until I've got this zoomed to the right level and got everything where it's meant to be. It's just...
I can't see that far, so it's quite safe.
Okay, I need to just put more space in here. So I'm going to scroll down through these ones very, very slowly. By now, you've probably all seen the answer for this one. But let's do it anyway.
Some of them might be longer.
Okay, cool. Well, that's okay. We can all learn from these. this over here so I can just see what's going on this side. Okay, we still have 2 online viewers. So thanks for hanging in there, guys. Okay. So which of the following compensating controls should management implement when a segregation of duties conflict exists because an organization has a small IT department? Okay. So quite a practical kind of question. We come across this thing quite often here in KZN with a lot of the small organizations around. You can't just go and hire people if you can't afford to and the business can't afford to do it. But at the same time, you can't just give up and say, well, there's nothing we can do. So we need to come up with those intermediate steps. Okay. So compensating controls that need to be implemented where there's a segregation of duty because you've got a small IT audit department. So A, more frequent review of audit logs.
Activity.
Does frequency of review compensate for lack of segregation of duties?
Probably not, because
Not if it's the wrong guys doing it.
Yeah.
So the wrong guy doing the control more often is not going to compensate for it. Okay. B, tighter controls over user provisioning. I don't think that's really going to help us either, because this is not a user provisioning issue. Okay. C, more frequent review of administrative access. C is kind of like A. So it could pick something up if somebody created an admin when they shouldn't have, or something like that, but it's still not feeling like it's a... Yeah. D, independent review of exception reports.
Yeah, probably.
The independent review is kind of the one that kind of helps a little bit around those kind of conflicts there. And if there's things coming up in exception reports, so if you could get that right and define the exception reports, any challenge with D might be that, what happens if you don't have somebody independent to do it? But they were giving it to us as an option, implying that there is somebody independent to do it. So, votes on this one?
But then what I was thinking with D was the exception reports part of it. So that if we have a sort of conflict issue that we know about, does that mean they would then set up the exception logs? Because I thought we had to look at everything.
Well, that's kind of part of the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that, if it's an SED conflict, the guy's got admin access, he could perhaps delete something from the logs before they even ended up in the exception report. But how far do you take that?
Like we say, don't overthink it.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. Is that I could kind of give you a way to break all of these things. That, if you've got one guy there who's completely untrustworthy and he's got keys to the kingdom, well, then he can do anything. So hopefully you've done your background checks and integrity checks correctly when you employed the guy in the first place. Because otherwise you've got a bit of a problem. But the most likely one of these is the D, perhaps review of the exception there. But let's see what the answer is, and remember what the answer is. So when you get a question like this, you know how to deal with it. Because these are those tricky ones. Okay. And the correct answer is D. Okay. So A, let's just quickly look. While frequent review of audit logs is a compensating control, if there's no clear segregation of duties, this is an ineffective control. Okay? So doing an ineffective control more often doesn't make it effective. It's still ineffective. B, user provisioning is process of granting access to an application or system. While a normal part of this is to make sure there's no segregation of duties, this cannot be done in the present case due to small size of IT. So B is not helping us. C is also an ineffective type control because of the small department, so more frequency of that is not going to help us. And D is the only one that actually gives us some semblance of control. Okay, and they do say there, assuming that the integrity of the exceptional reporting process can be validated through audit. So there's a massive assumption in there, because if you can't prove the integrity, well, then it's broken anyway. But it's the only one that gives you any kind of help. Okay, so that comes back to the overthinking. Okay, this is an interesting one. The primary control purpose of required vacations or job rotation. If you go back to like auditing 101, and the
Yeah.
first time you ever come across auditing, it's kind of
That's
like
it.
always, yeah, no, you have to send your people on leave. Okay. So now it's a question of can you remember why? Okay. A, allow cross-training for development. See, required vacation doesn't do that, job rotation does. So that can't be the answer because they're saying this or that. And going on leave doesn't force that.
I've got a vote
Okay.
already.
B, help preserve employee morale. If you never get to go on holiday, you're going to be pretty miserable, but I don't think that's the primary purpose. C, detect improper or illegal employee acts.
Yeah.
I'm hearing yes, yes, yes all around. We still have to read D, remember?
That's auditing 101. They tell you.
Provide a competitive employee benefit. No,
No.
it's not primary objective. Okay, so C is the main thing.
So one poster they tell you that
Yeah.
go look at the guy who never goes on holiday.
It's really
Yeah.
hard, like preventing yourself from getting excited. So when you see one, it's like this is the one. This is the one.
Well,
First training or
an
development, you
interesting,
take them for holiday.
an interesting conversation we had with somebody at the IT Web conference
Yeah.
was around how these days we're always connected. So we've got our mobile phones with us. And on our mobile phones, we have access to email. And increasingly, you've got access to do approvals on systems, all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And we're saying, well, hang on. In order to preserve this particular control over here, should you not be turning email off when somebody goes on
Yeah.
vacation and turning off their access to systems? Otherwise, they could be on vacation, they could be away, and they log in just to process that one transaction. Or they answer enough of those emails just to deflect the whole thing. So this control may no longer be effective in this always connected, always on, always available environment, because very few people turn off email and access to systems. So it's like,
This question
interesting.
was
You
being
need-
simplistic.
But at least we still got one answer, right? Even if we know that there's other things that you need to take into account. Okay, so we're not going to read through that. Okay. An IS auditor finds that a database administrator has read and write access to production data. The IS auditor should. Okay, so is it common or uncommon to find your DBAs with read and write access to production data? Okay, it is common. There's not that many instances when you find a DBA who doesn't have this, despite everything that's claimed. There's very few systems in place that prevent this kind of stuff from happening. Okay. So, A, should we just accept the DBA access as common practice? That doesn't sound reasonable because we know there's risk involved here. B, assess the controls relevant to the DBA function. Yeah, you should be doing that.
Yeah.
C, recommend the immediate revocation of the DBA access to production data. That could break many, many things. D, review user access authorizations approved by the DBA. That's not even relevant. So there's your one that you can cross out immediately. Okay. So, based on this, the answer is
B.
B. And the correct answer is B. See? We're all getting a few of these right. Okay, so I'm going to leave it up on screen for a second or two, and then you can just read it through in your own time. Okay, but part of what they're saying is typically DBA needs access to some production data. You can't take it all away. So don't overreact to these things. Do a proper assessment. The worst thing we can do in trying to avoid creating problems with confidentiality, integrity, or availability is creating availability problems by crashing the system. Okay. Which of the following is the most important action in recovering from a cyber attack? Okay. So it's not saying defending, it's saying recovering, which implies that we've been hit and we've got a problem. Yeah. Okay. A, creating an incident response team.
You're still creating it.
Creating, the word creating sounds like a problem.
Oh, wow, you've already done, you're still creating the.
You know, if they said invoke or call it together or initiate the response plan, if they're meaning like create it in terms of an existing process where it's already defined, you're just pulling together this virtual team, then yeah, okay, maybe. But if you're saying, like, start thinking about creating a team from scratch, then you're thinking, oh, it's a bit late for that. Okay.
Yeah.
B, using cyber forensic investigators.
Yes.
We haven't seen the other options.
Yes. Because my argument before is that, okay, you might recover, but you don't know the source of your attack. So if you're using the cyber forensic investigators to be able to pinpoint where the attack happened.
You recover, don't understand why.
So yeah, I'd agree with you in saying that you need to do that as a step. Okay. Now, what happens if I told you that, you know, those guys are very, very expensive. Okay. To get a good team to come in and do that could cost you 20 million rand.
Sure.
Okay. And it might take them 6 months. Okay. And yes, by the end of it, you'll know exactly what's going on, how it happened, what happened, where these guys went, what they did. And those could be important things to stop it happening again in the future. Okay? But is it the most important thing? You know, we've kind of lost sight of the fact that we've got a business to run here and we've got clients to serve. Okay. So
C.
C, executing a business continuity plan.
Yes.
We've got business to run here, people.
Yes.
D, filing an insurance claim.
That's not the most important thing.
If you've got a really good insurance claim that will reimburse you for lost business and you know you're going to win the claim, yeah, then you could look at that. If that's your cash out plan to shut down the business.
Yeah.
So C, execute a business continuity plan. Business must continue. So of all those options, you know, it's like, yeah, correct answer C.
Yeah. I'm getting one out of.
You know, from the Security Summit, I say it's important to have cyber forensic.
It is important to have the cyber forensic capability there.
Like invoking PCP, but
Yeah. And then another key will have been recover, and that's cyber forensics will have been more for investigation.
Yeah, cyber forensic team is an investigation to perhaps prevent
Cause
future
analysis,
incidents from
yeah.
happening or to prevent a repeat of it. Okay? But to actually recover from it, it's like a bit more, if we're down and we can't transact right now, the BCP is what's going to help us transact. Here's an interesting one. An organization has recently installed a security patch which crashed the production server. Okay. To minimize the probability of this occurring again, an IS auditor should do what? A, apply the patch according to the patch's release notes. Well, that would imply that they didn't do that the first time, which would be negligent. So we kind of go, no, that probably won't help. Okay, the release notes often don't say too much. They kind of tell you what it's going to fix, not necessarily how to implement it, but it could. B, ensure that a good change management process is in place. Well,
Maybe C.
that implies that you had a bad one in place and that allowed this thing to go through. C, thoroughly test the patch before sending it to production.
Probably that.
No, you should be doing that. D, approve the patch after doing a risk assessment. I don't think you can do a risk assessment for every single patch. You kind of do, if you're following an effective change management process, every change you implement should have like a mini risk assessment, an impact assessment done as part of the change with a backup plan and all that good kind of stuff. So you could do a mini one, but you wouldn't be doing a full risk assessment.
Say why I was overthinking this one. It says an IS auditor should just apply the badge.
Okay.
To minimize the
so you're onto something there.
occurring. Because the question there says to minimize probability of this occurring again. So it has happened.
I think
And you're trying to find-
you're missing what MX is saying though, okay? He's saying, who applies the patch? Is it the system administrator or the IS auditor?
System administrator.
So A can't be done because it's not the IS auditor doing that. B, ensure there's a good change management process in place. Yeah, that's his job to do that. D, thoroughly test the patch. No way. D, approve the patch. Not his job. So any one of these is the job of the IS auditor.
It's B.
And it comes back to one of those exam techniques we said right at the beginning. look at this from the point of view of the IS auditor. So if we look at that, the only answer can be D. So let's hope the answer is D. And the correct answer is B. So it was as simple as that.
Just
Because this is not going to be done by an auditor. So
I looked at it.
I'm sure we all.
See, that
No,
is
we all looked at it from the client point of view.
view. Absolutely.
But we didn't read the question properly.
Yeah. We must read the question properly.
Just
Good catch.
guilty.
I was just as guilty. But I was listening to what MX was saying as well. And as soon as he said that, it's like, hey, wait, you're onto something. Look at this. No way, there's only one here.
But we're not gonna have MX in the paper. So you have it next one.
say that the other choices are good, but not in the.
So when you find yourself reading half the question and not reading it properly, just remember little MX sitting on your shoulder going, ah.
But then again, Emily has seen these questions.
It's
You know how,
okay.
what his memory is like.
He did these long ago. I don't remember this.
So some of them are seen again.
Okay. Management observed that the initial phase of a multi-phase implementation was behind schedule and over budget. Okay, so we got this project, lots of phases.
So,
We got the first part, it's over budget and behind schedule. And management observed that, not the auditors. Prior to commencing with the next phase, an IS auditor's primary suggestion for a post-implementation focus should be to. Okay, so what are we going to do with this thing now, in between these two phases? Are we going to assess whether the planned cost benefits are being measured, analyzed, and reported? We could, but that's not really going to help us with the future phases of this thing, I don't think. B, review control balances and verify the system is processing data accurately.
not for me.
Okay. C, review subsequent program change requests for the first phase.
Subsequent program change request. Subsequent, after that's after now.
We've had that come up before in the context of saying when you kind of complete the first phase, and now they're running with this thing, if there's a whole ton of program changes that come through immediately after go live, it's all to like do emergency fix type stuff for things that weren't implemented properly. So it can be a good indication that this thing didn't meet the needs
What
of the
was
business,
there?
or that the testing wasn't done properly, or that there's something going wrong. So it's a good indicator of that. Okay. D, determine whether the system's objectives were achieved.
Is that now between phase 1 and phase 2? Or
No.
you're talking post?
Because it's talking says prior to commencing with the next phase. So we're doing this in between the phases.
Suggestions for post. So before, in between the two, you should say what they should focus on. You should suggest that what should focus for post implementation.
Yeah.
Did you get what you have achieved? Whether the plan and being measured and reported. You say that A that you threw away, because look, if you finish phase 1 and you finish phase 2, right?
Yeah.
And you know phase 1 is behind, right? And over budget, right? Now you're saying, okay, you're trying to see the root cause for that. You're saying, okay, are we looking at cost versus benefit or whatever? Like maybe sort of whatever answer you get them, it might sort of help you in the next one to say.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking, because you're saying you know something has gone wrong in the first one, but the question is now, in the first phase that you've already done, did you do a cost benefit whatever? Because maybe it might, this might tell, it might, what's the word now? Inform what happens in the second phase. I don't know.
It could.
Between A and D,
I'm listening. Other views?
we didn't,
I mean, it's kind of.
because that in between means that you're thinking to inform the other part.
Let's hear some other views. We've had similar questions to this one, not exactly the same,
Yes.
but similar. And I can remember what the answer given was last time. So that's why I'm kind of keeping quiet a little bit for now. But I'm interested in hearing some comments here. What's normally the objective of a post-implementation?
Lessons learned.
And?
And check if objectives are met of what we are trying to do.
Okay. And benefits realization normally has to be done slightly further down the line because it's normally a separate review that happens. You know, because it might take much longer to realize your benefits. You may not get it in the time frame of post-implementation investment and all that. It might be like 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line that you would measure that. So it's probably too soon to be doing A. Okay.
Also in the middle, we are looking at
D.
Using process of elimination.
Well,
Yes.
and the answer is?
I was also
When we started the
Yeah.
in the beginning when we discussed it. And the program change process is also very important.
Yes.
Because you know if you're meeting the objectives at the beginning. You know, if you're getting too much of program change process, that means
you discussed this a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did discuss this. You remember if there are lots of, you know.
So what does the answer say? Since management is aware that the project had problems, reviewing the subsequent fixes will provide insight into the types and potential causes of the project issues. This will help to identify whether IT has adequately planned for those issues in the subsequent phases. While all the choices of valid post-implementation focus and primary objectives should be assuring that the issues of the initial phase are addressed. So they're all valid. It's a matter then of saying which one is the most relevant in this scenario. And C has come up before as being a key indicator and
Program change. Yeah, all right, okay.
Okay. So due to a recent economic downturn, an IT organization has terminated several administrators and consolidated all IT administration at its central headquarters. Okay, so we fired a whole bunch of people because we can't afford to keep them. During an IT audit, the auditor determines that the organization has implemented remote administration connectivity to each site using low-cost DSL lines and an automated, simple network management protocol-based monitoring system. Okay. So the centralized stuff, they've got a remote access connection coming into these places. They're using an SNMP-based monitoring system. Okay. What's the greatest concern? A, authentication methods used for remote access may be inadequate. Yep, that could
Possibly,
be a concern. The physical security at remote sites may not be adequate. Yeah,
Probably, but I don't know how.
probably, but that hasn't changed. Unless you're thinking that there's a high risk profile because these guys have been fired, maybe they'll go back and do some stuff. But that it's not really changed, other than so maybe. C, terminated employees may retain access to systems at remote sites. Yeah, how would you worry about that? D, the connection to the remote sites is not using a VPN for connectivity.
A. A. See, when you decentralize.
Okay, so I'm hearing an A and I'm hearing a D. Other votes?
Where
the
the
activity.
EFF
The
goes.
protocol used for the activity in terms of security is not as strong. And then when they say the VPN is not implemented, yes, that's a concern.
I'm hearing lots of silence from the others.
Where is the guys who can take P's and C's?
Only are taken. Okay, answers quickly. Sorry?
D.
D. D. D. Okay, let's look and see.
Shocked, guys.
Correct answer is D. Okay. So if you just look, the DSL lines are normally internet based. It's like your ADSL through Telcom or whatever. Okay, that's going through the internet, it's unencrypted, it's insecure. If you're not running a VPN over that, how are you now securing those remote connections? VPN is the way you would achieve that. And it's a fairly common way. So that was kind of a bit of a hint
So
there.
sometimes when we answer this question, we also have to make assumptions. Like the assumption there, we have the choice to pick. The assumption that when the guys are terminated, their access are actually revoked immediately. So in this case, it's like making an assumption.
For me, as a network person, I look at
Unencrypted.
protocol, which is
Yeah,
so many
and
engines, and
Yeah. So if you look at it as well, they're telling you in the question there that it's an insecure remote access system versus they're not saying to us access was definitely not revoked. So if you kind of switch that around a little bit and they said it was a secure remote access solution,
Yeah.
and then they said to you it was discovered that remote access hadn't been revoked, then you would have switched your answer. So, which of the following is the most efficient strategy for the backup of large quantities of mission-critical data when the systems need to be online to take sales orders 24 hours a day? So what's it saying? We can't take the system offline. We have to be able to do backups all the time. The system needs to be online 24 hours a day, and there's large quantities of this data. Okay. So option A, implementing a fault-tolerant disk-to-disk backup solution. Okay. Possible. B, making a full backup to tape weekly and incremental backup nightly.
Weekly. And in between?
Yeah, and incremental backup nightly. You know, it's sounding like high volume system. Even nightly backups, you know, if you took an Amazon or someone, and if they were just doing nightly backups, the world would be in trouble. C, creating a duplicate storage area network and replicating the data to a second SAN. Okay. That's a fairly common way of doing things. Okay. Normally you have a fiber connection between the two at high speed, and you can do that. C, creating identical server and storage infrastructure. Okay, but that's a completely different issue they talk about. They're not talking about backup data. So it's between A and C, and C is the more likely solution. Okay. Whoa.
Ah! Let's hear the reason.
Let's see this.
this versus
Okay, so what's the key?
At a later stage. Transformed without impacting system performance and allows a large contact data to be picked up in a very short period of time.
So if we look at A and we look at C, there's a key difference between them. Okay, so A, disk-to-disk backup solution is a backup solution. Okay, SAN-to-SAN replication is keeping a second copy of the data, but it's not a backup solution. You still don't end up with a backup. You end up with a second copy of your data, a second live copy. That if there is any error introduced in the primary copy, that error will then be duplicated across the secondary copy. You still have no backup that you can restore from. So C is fairly common, but it's not a backup solution. You would still need a backup solution at the remote SAN site to take copies of the data and back it up somewhere, which they didn't say to us is in place. Therefore, you said that disk to disk is very expensive, which it is, but it's also the only backup solution out of this.
Reliable? Yes, I agree. Much reliable. It's a high cost.
It is a high cost, yeah. So we need to read questions carefully. Again, on that one, I also am guilty jumped to the conclusion.
The cost.
It's gonna be a long, how many hours? 4 hours.
It will go very quickly.
So, no, 4 hours. Is the skip what you don't know strategy? That's what
Sorry?
that was.
Skip what you don't know. Flag it and guess it.
I'm saying flag. Like, if you don't know something immediately, don't spend like 5 minutes on it.
No, never spend more than a minute. On
Flag
a question.
it and just come back.
You're allowed to have a piece of paper and say, okay, I'll skip question one.
Mark it on your question sheet.
Mm.
Just circle it or put a question mark on your question sheet in that scenario. We discussed it earlier, so go back and watch the video. But I think the idea is don't leave things blank.
Yeah, definitely not.
Because you may never come back to it.
Yeah.
Read it, take your best guess, fill it in, flag it on the question paper, go through all of the questions. When you've got time, come back and relook at those ones. Okay. So, which of the following is the best indicator of the effectiveness of backup and restore procedures while restoring data after a disaster?
Members of the recovery team recovery drills met. Inventory of backup tapes was properly maintained. Backup tapes completely restored at an alternate site. Did you get all of them, guys? They're available, but did you meet your recovery or objective? Effective. B is my bed. Effective macro cells while restoring effectiveness of the backup and restore procedures. So we're talking about backup and restore procedures. Yeah. Because of that and restore. Because of N that restore.
Backup and restore.
So which option you going with?
B.
B. Okay, any other answers? So A doesn't really help us if everybody's available, but that data can't be restored. B, recovery time objectives were met, so that means data was recovered and within the time period that was required. C, inventory of backup tapes was properly maintained. Yeah, well, okay, that's nice, but if the inventory was maintained and you couldn't recover the data, it doesn't help you. D, backup tapes were completely restored to an alternate site. That's great, but was it done within the required time frames or not? So B is then probably the incorrect answer is B. Okay. So D is a good answer, but B is a better answer because you've done that plus done it within the time.
I think I did this before. You explained nicely the RPO.
Those are worth marks too. Don't forget RTOs, RPOs. Okay, I've got a question online here that I missed from Abdul Nishtar saying, what happens if during the exam you come across a new term that you've not heard before, that you don't understand, and you haven't studied it? What do you do in that case? It's kind of a difficult one. You kind of need to use that exam technique and go through that process of elimination and then have a best guess.
Like what you do, you know what you do when you read like a normal thing and you hear it sing, you take the whole sentence and try and see
use
what
the context
is. Yeah. because it's not in Saturday. You can't put up your hand and say what does it mean.
Yes, you can't.
So I'm just typing back here. Use the context in the question to try and figure it out, and then take best case. I think also we spoke earlier about the ISACA kind of, what do they call it, the glossary of terms. You can log onto the ISACA website, they've got an interactive glossary there, and you can download a CISA glossary of terms. Okay, I would suggest you do that, and maybe have it with you while you're going through questions now over the next week, and use that as an opportunity to go through the glossary and use those terms and definitions. So at least if you, by the end of it, have got to grips with all of those ones, it'll severely limit the chance of you coming across a term that you don't have within the exam. So we've, I think, got one or two questions left. Let's try and get through those. I've got my dinner date, an ex-colleague waiting for me, currently drinking beer, telling me my beer is getting warm. Okay, so a private enterprise has a project in place to modify the financial accounting system to comply with major changes in tax laws. Okay, so it's a key system, the financial system, and you don't want to mess with tax laws, because if you mess that up, there could be severe penalties and things in place. Prior to going live, the finance manager as the application owner went on emergency leave and could not complete functional testing of the application. Okay. The development team lead believes that the changes should be implemented without approval from the business owner. Okay, kind of comes back to what we had in that earlier kind of question about doing something without the business process owner. That one was, changing service providers, and that was a definite no-no. Now we want to change systems without the application owners. Okay, I think that would also be a no-no, but there might be some other options we could use. So let's see what they're going. A, changes be moved to production without business process or approval if appropriate testing is performed and the enterprise owner approves the move to production.
Yes.
So that's a possibility, because not being left to IT to do it, it's almost a one level up from who's doing it. Okay. B, changes should never be promoted to production without application over approval. If there's an urgent need to implement the change, the manager covering for the finance manager should review the testing and provide approval. That one also sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Okay. C, the changes can be moved to production because the application has been used for 5 years and has been stable. The dev team lead can act as backup to the finance manager. No. Okay, so at least we eliminated one. D, the changes can be moved to production without business process owner approval because the dev team lead has significant knowledge in accounting. And Nope. No, can do. Okay, so now we need to choose between A and B.
I choose A.
So A is kind of implying that appropriate testing is performed. B is also saying testing should be performed. A is an upward delegation to enterprise owner. B is a downward delegation to the finance manager who is covering for. So
A. If Marsha is not so Vina must do it. A. I'm saying A. If Marsha is not the timing must do it. It's an upward delegation.
But what if it's someone that's covering? It's like same power.
But it's better. I'd rather have my boss do it when I'm not there.
But your boss doesn't really.
He should know. My boss should know. But he should know.
Now you're getting onto some interesting ones. So it's like, so who you're more comfortable with? Well, it's easier to upward delegate because then it's like, no, they take responsibility anyway. It might be more effective for the guys actually covering. If it's an official acting, that would probably be the better person because they actually know what's going on and they can actually test it. So now you've got to make a choice between this.
A.
I'm doing some A and doing some B.
I'm going for A.
Okay, so let's see what the answer is.
I'm
This is an interesting one.
I
And the
trust
answer
my
is B. No, it's not. It's A.
I trust my boss more than my colleagues. I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you, I trust my boss more than my.
It's always the one.
But it's in this case, it's if the guy actually knows what he's doing. In terms of the
You
enterprise
see,
or-
ultimately accountable. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the guy who's gonna.
Dependency.
Yeah, that's the guy who's gonna go answer at Expo if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You see?
that's it. And he can go back down to the junior guy and say, hey, are you comfortable with this? Not okay. You've done testing. Is it okay? What's up with this thing? The junior guy might just get paralysis and never approve the thing. When I think
Yeah.
Yeah. And if something goes wrong, that junior guy is going to be in deep trouble. So,
I trust my boss. Sorry, guys.
so important principle there.
Yeah.
Just confused with the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, I mean, you see, the thing is, even for the financial manager and the CFO, right? Although the guy doesn't do the day-to-day, but he should know what the work you do. You should sort of have an idea. And I mean, if anything goes wrong, you can sit there, expert, and say, "I've taken the decision," and that's my thinking. This is one more.
Okay. I'm hoping this is the last question because I'm terribly late.
Because your beer is getting.
Okay. During an audit of an enterprise that's dedicated to e-commerce, so it's another one of those e-commerce ones, the IS manager states that digital signatures are used when receiving communications from customers. Okay. To substantiate this, an IS auditor must prove that which of the following is used. So we're talking digital signatures. Okay. So when there's digital signatures in place, what do we expect to see in place? Some kind of PKI solution.
Yeah.
Okay. And for PKI solution, we need some kind of public keys and some kind of private keys,
Yeah.
so that you can confirm that. Yeah. Okay. So, do we need a biometric, digitalized, and encrypted parameter
Wow.
with the customer's public key? Nah. Okay.
Wow,
Sounds way overcomplicated. Okay. Do we need a hash of the data transmitted and encrypted with the customer's private key?
Yes.
That's pretty much what a digital signature is. So that works. B, a hash of the data that's transmitted and encrypted with the customer's public key. No, because then we would need their private key and then it's no longer private. So it can't be C. D, the customer's scanned signature encrypted with the customer's public key. Huh?
I go for B.
No.
Scan the signature, we'll take a nice photo and make it look pretty and Photoshop it. Okay, so B is the only sensible answer out of all of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I went too far there. So you all know the answer is D, but let's see what the question is.
Wow.
This is one of those ones. Okay, here's the answer. What's the question? Okay, so a laptop belonging to a company DBA and containing a file of production database passwords has been stolen. What should the organization do first? Well, that's one of the options. D. So how did you guess that
Wow, I feel like I'm gonna
one? Okay. I think on that note, we should probably call it quits then for the evening.
Saturday.
So Saturday, we shall see you all here bright and early, 7 o'clock.
There goes my morning job.
I'll try and get the guard at the gate to keep the gate open. But
Or we just
if there's a problem, just sit there and hoot, and it doesn't matter. Just keep
Yeah.
hooting until they let you in or
Yeah.
do whatever the case is. Okay.
All right.
But we shall see you all then. Okay, cool.
Well, you rush for
I'm gonna have
we
to
go.
I'm gonna
we
have
go
to
for-
shut up very quickly and come out, lock out, and let you guys out. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to let you out. So don't hoot too much at the guy on the way out because he can't let you out.
Oh. He said
Okay.
he didn't have a remote.
Yeah, he doesn't. Okay, cool. Thanks very much to our online viewers. Hope that was all useful. And yeah, we'll see you again soon. We probably won't broadcast Saturday's session because watching people write for 4 hours won't be useful. But perhaps the 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock side of things we will broadcast. So have a good evening and hang in there with the studies and keep going. It's almost over and I'm sure you guys will all do very well. Cheers.